truth, logic, common sense, that gut feeling, and yes, even a little psychoanalysis. As we are once again together, you and I. We are once again together, you and I, to move forward, to get a little justice through understanding of the federal lawsuit that was filed against Tim Ballard and the alleged victims. When I began this series, we opened it up with an overview of one of the alleged victims. Her name was Krista Casey. And just to remind all of y'all, what she began to speak of was her own personal thoughts and feelings about why she joined the lawsuit. She didn't go into detail about what actually happened. We're going to go through that tonight. But the reminder also is what she says, and that is allowing people to face the consequences of their actions is a true act of love. That's how we learn. That's how we develop resilience. And that's how we wake up to the need to work on ourselves. So this Krista Casey, she explained why she joined the lawsuit and explained, how she was feeling, the grooming process that she felt she'd been through, the fact that she thought she would probably have to go through therapy a long time in her life. And so we are going to now get into the specificity of what her allegations are, which are attached to the federal lawsuit. Let's keep in mind, y'all, the question: did Tim Ballard use anti-trafficking organization, OUR, to actually traffic women, violate women, or sexually assault women? We'll just have to see what happens on it all, y'all. But I'm going to go into it now, and we're going to go through other victims that we have not heard from. And I just want to make it clear to y'all, this is adult content, so if you don't want to hear some of this stuff, I'm just telling you now, it's pretty bad, okay? So let's get started. My introduction to ops, in other words, operations. I first met Tim Ballard while working on a film project in 2020, during which he spoke about the power of prayer. I left that day a strengthened testimony of prayer and determination to pray more specifically with greater faith. A year later, I was working on a set again with Tim. He remembered me from our previous encounter and asked, "What's your story?" I gave him some milestones of my personal journey, including how I had returned from living in Asia and divorced after my husband had fully relapsed into sex addiction. Tim then showed me a video with a lady he had just rescued from Thailand and said that because we're not sex addicts, which was a line that I kept on replay in my mind every time I doubted, they could go into dark places and fight those who promulgate the very filth that had caused me such devastation. I felt like he was literally fighting on my behalf. When filming was complete, he said, "You're a hair and makeup artist. Can you do tattoos?" I told him I could, and he asked me if I could also bleach his hair platinum to create a cool SoCal look. He explained he was going on a mission with a fake girlfriend the following week and needed help creating their costumes, then suggested that I could help with her disguise as well. She was a police officer and needed some feminine refinement, her makeup done, and help with her hair. Tim suggested it would be great if I could go down to Mexico with them to keep the tattoos looking fresh, because sometimes on missions, they start to fade and then it puts him in great danger. He looked at David, who had come on the set with him, and said, "Remember that? When we were on the op and my tats started to fade? That was scary." He asked for my number, if I had a valid passport, and if I would be available Saturday to get ready. He said they had supplies and everything already since he had an appointment with another hair and makeup artist, he would just call her off and get the products from her so I could apply them. He said the other artists lined up didn't have a valid passport, and because of the COVID delays, it was almost impossible for her to renew, so she wasn't able to travel with them. He later texted to work out details for meeting up to apply his tats and bleach his hair. He asked if I would even consider going out as an operator, mentioning the possibility of having me pose as his girlfriend and testing my comfortability with all that. He said he thought I would be really good and it would make things easier for him because he wasn't really attracted to this other operator, and how that could throw off the operation because their relationship isn't as believable. He told me about an operation where he was coupled with a burly female Mexican and had to abandon the operation entirely because he just couldn't even fake it with her. I told Tim I wasn't sure if I could play that part, not knowing what it would require of me, how safe it would be, how it might affect me mentally, what I would need to say and do to keep our cover and not screw it up, etc. Tim assured me there wasn't anything to worry about, as he would cover for me and do all the talking. It was best for me to be the quiet, reserved cock blocker. That would be my principal role. Protect Tim at all costs. I often told people I was essentially Tim's bodyguard with the purpose of protecting both him and Catherine via protecting their relationship from sex workers, which I believed I could do well because I'm firm in my boundaries, integrity, and intent. I was extremely excited about being given the trust and chance to participate in something that I felt passionate about and could make such a direct impact. But I was very hesitant about the role. What a heavy responsibility for me to do things just right with our lives on the line and no experience in how traffickers work or what exactly I was supposed to do and how that might affect me in the long run. I told him I was willing but unsure if I was right for the fit. He said we would start out super slow, just holding hands around town and such to see if I felt comfortable. That seemed innocuous enough. I could handle that. Tim asked me to pray about it to see if it was something I felt good about and that we would talk in more detail on Saturday. I had many questions but couldn't believe the opportunity. Later that week, Tim told me he knew when we first was speaking that he had received the divine impression that he was supposed to ask me about being an operator. This is the same guy who had strengthened my faith in prayer, and I easily trusted he could have received that revelation from God, and I believed it myself. My close friend reaffirmed that I was absolutely perfect for the role, saying all of my personality type that we are the ones who want to save the world and don't want anyone to know about it. We met up at an OUR office that Saturday and were initially with Cooper and a few others who had brought in supplies and Tim's wardrobe for the operation. The others eventually left me and Tim alone as I worked on his disguise, and he seemed genuinely interested in knowing how I felt about life, the gospel, my situation being single, and my perception of him and the work he does. Tim inquired about my sexuality in light of my spirituality. He was especially curious about how I, as an active member of my church, would see going in on these missions and playing the part. We had lengthy discussions about what actions would be justified by God in this work. Throughout the afternoon and evening, he was impressed that I got it and was willing to do whatever was required for the cause, and still feel strongly that it would be in keeping with my standards. Since my highest standard is to sacrifice everything necessary for the Lord and His purposes, and I could conceive of no greater purpose than to free God's children in captivity, I was increasingly willing to participate without question of the personal costs. For the next several hours as I worked, Tim began to tell me more about the tactics they used to keep their cover on operations. I'd been aware of his close association with Elder Ballard, so it seemed natural when he told me they met on a regular basis to receive blessings and to discuss OUR proceedings. Tim told me of the time he told Catherine he couldn't do ops anymore, that the thought of descending into the filth made him sick. Then he received revelation of using a girlfriend relationship, later deemed the couple's ruse, as a cover. According to Tim, he presented the plan to Elder Ballard, who thought it was brilliant and specifically sanctioned the strategy. I could see how going undercover as a couple would be valuable, so it made sense that it would have come from an apostle of the Lord. I asked various questions about my role and what it would require. Would I need to drink alcohol, which I had never done? No, Tim said, he never has to drink. He's really good at faking it and told me some of his tricks. Would I have to swear, which I also don't do? Yes, I could practice it. That evening, Tim asked me if I had practiced saying the F word in the mirror. What was my physical risk? Would I ever be in a situation alone with traffickers or where another man would be expecting me to be sexual with him? Tim responded that our roles were to protect each other from exactly that. So we would only need to be sexual with each other and only to the extent of the situation. Of course, we would abide by strict standards and need to be able to both connect and trust each other. Tim confided to me many secrets, like that he had just gotten a full body wax for the first time and asked if I ever had, saying it's so much more appealing and he wishes Catherine would. He told me to go shopping and get sexy clothes so we could test it out this next week if we got the chance. We were in frequent contact throughout the weekend. He asked me to send shots of the sexy clothes I got and screenshot tattoos and placements I was considering. Plans changed and I was asked to leave Monday instead. This would give us more time to practice. Tim had asked if I had any concerns and I told him I had plenty. So we planned to discuss them while we were down in Mexico. He picked me up from the airport in Mexico City along with a driver who I was assured only spoke Spanish, so we could speak openly and confidentially of our long drive to the home where we'd be staying that first night. I shared both my written and mental lists of questions. My greatest concern was for Catherine and how this worked with their relationship, since the whole point of going in as a pretend couple was to safeguard his real relationship with his wife by preventing him from having to do heinous acts with victims of trafficking. I wanted to know how he was able to keep emotionally stable and not blur the relationships. He assured me this was the best thing he could do for his relationship with Catherine, and that she knew it too. She helped choose me. He said that they always decide together who should go on these operations, who fits the part as a legitimate partner for him with the right look, the height, and spirit. He said he had shown Catherine my picture, and she felt strongly about me, agreeing I was the one. As for making sure the role play doesn't turn into real play, Tim said there were strict rules. No kissing on the lips because that makes it too difficult not to create a real attachment. No undressing or touching of private parts. No texting, calling, or continuation of the role outside of the operation. These stated standards helped me feel so safe about keeping that distinction, and I was thrilled to know that he took this seriously for my protection as well. Apparently, a previous operator had insisted on calling him and trying to see him after the operation because she got too connected and couldn't let him go. He adamantly reminded her that they weren't in a real relationship. He couldn't work with her anymore after that. He told me about how he and another female operator, a big-time actress, were in a situation where they were staying with the trafficker who brought into their bedroom 10 to 12 minors to dance for them and have sex play. To avoid the minors, this actress and Tim lied on the bed, pretending to make out and have sex, complete with fake orgasms and a shower afterwards, to convince the trafficker that they had actually had sex. After playing the role, the woman was so legitimately horny that she had insisted on kissing him on the mouth, saying it wasn't fair to get her so worked up and then leave her hanging. Tim was furious and reminded her of her place. Because of that, he could never work with her again. She was so upset at not being included in future operations. The following year, Tim told me he was considering having that operator come on another operation with us, and ultimately did, because she now has a boyfriend and is promising she's in a more stable place, wanted to prove she could handle it now, and pleaded for another shot. The way Tim verbally attacked previous operators and people who betrayed him, which meant anyone who stood up to him, including the CEO, other directors, or women who dared question him on his operations, was a regular lesson on how I was expected to behave in order to work with him. And I took note. Initially, the expectations of our conduct was not printed, but Tim took videos of us after the operation for both our protection. He had learned this the hard way because he had been accused in the past of acting inappropriately. Tim recorded that I had treated him appropriately and with respect and asked me whether he had done the same. In time, Cooper wrote up and asked for signatures, calling it a couple's ruse agreement. Notice, Tim's signature was not required. And let me just read this couple ruse. It's actually, they got it right here. This is an actual photocopy of it. This is what they think is okay to do, all right? The OUR Undercover Operations Couples Ruse Agreement. The couples ruse is a cover for status and cover for action technique employed by OUR undercover operators. It will require a male-female pair posing as a couple under a false pretense that they are romantically involved. The couple will create the appearance of being romantically involved as they deem appropriate. The couples ruse will be used by OUR operatives to infiltrate human trafficking criminal networks. The operators will use their status as a couple to engage traffickers and trafficking victims without abusing victims or engaging in harmful illicit activities where male operators would normally be expected to do so. The couple's ruse has proven effective in allowing OUR operators to gain access and intelligence into trafficking organizations. And as I read this, I am thinking of a federal judge looking over this federal lawsuit and reading this smut. I'm thinking about this was an agreement she signed, and yet Tim Ballard didn't have to sign it. It was all for show. It was to put this woman at ease, y'all. The acknowledgement says, by signing this agreement, you acknowledge you understand the couple's ruse, its limitations, and that both persons participating in the couple's ruse will not violate and have not violated the limitations of the couple's ruse as defined in the agreement. That's crazy, y'all. It says here, no kissing on the lips, touching or exposing private parts, including breast and genitalia. And folks, every one of these women, these alleged victims, have said that he's done these things. So I guess the question is why would they go into such detail about these things? And all of them, not all of them are per se together. Some of them were different women that all at one time got together, but their stories, they just mirror each other. It's not like they all got together and just decided to just create this imaginative thing that Tim Ballard did when, y'all folks, I'm telling you, in my opinion, Tim Ballard did these things, okay? We arrived at the home of a wealthy politician where we would finish getting ready and stay the night. Tim had attended to most of my concerns, and now it was his turn. He told me how risky this whole situation is. More than just my life would be in danger, which he didn't seem to take seriously, and in time it would be little more than a joking conversation about how we would die, and that in fact he said he thought dying on an operation would be a cool way to go. Now let me just stop real quickly where they arrive at a wealthy politician. That tells me everything I need to know. Why isn't she naming this wealthy politician, right? Does that mean she's wrong? No, maybe she just left out the name because that's not the focus of the federal lawsuit. I don't know. The bottom line is it doesn't faze me a bit that these politicians are doing this smutty stuff behind the scenes. What is it? Attorney General Sean Reyes, allege. Oh yeah, he's getting his fill of his operation now, wasn't he? He was taking a very serious risk by bringing me along. He told me how important it was that I never say anything about what we're doing because I could literally ruin him. He seemed distressed as he asked, "Can you imagine what the response would be if you told people I went on an operation with Tim and he was all over me or anything like that?" I repeatedly assured Tim I would never ever say anything. He expounded that if I ever talked about what we were doing, he would have to deny it. I told him I understood. Tim continued talking about how it would appear to people who wouldn't understand, and I fervently agreed it could easily be misconstrued. Tim drilled it into my mind that he would have to use every resource he had to fight anything negative I might say about him, and that, of course, he would be sided with, and that he would be sided with. I knew that. It didn't matter. I was resolved that I would never, ever betray him. By this time, my heart was aching at the thought, and my eyes welled with tears. I told him I could never, ever say anything that would hurt you or the cause. That would be sacrificing everything I believe in, everything important to me about my own good character and all the good that OUR has done. It would be sacrificing the lives of innocent victims that I'm willing to lay down my life to rescue. That would be so devastating to me personally that I would rather die than falsely accuse him. Tim commended me, saying he had no doubt that I was sincere and trustworthy. I trusted him too, just by virtue of him being Tim Ballard. I only began to question Tim's claims when he needed constant reassurance that we weren't doing anything wrong. At the time, he was still seemingly concerned about compromising the temple covenants he made with his wife. I found it extremely odd that he worried so frequently about whether we were acting appropriately, and specifically asked me to confirm that we were in the right to be playing our roles. He worried aloud that he could not cheat on Catherine. His concern caused me, as a natural comforter, to engage regularly in this pattern of conversation. You received the idea of going in as a couple by revelation and immediately knew it as the answer you had been seeking, right? It was confirmed by Elder Ballard, right? And by going undercover as partners, we're protecting each other's chastity as well as preventing those who we engage with from having to perform sexual acts, right? Your wife is just as enthusiastic about this ingenious way to protect you, right? We were carefully selected to save lives in a unique way that God has trusted us to do, right? It's a righteous cause, and that calling came directly from heaven, right? Then we have no reason to be concerned. We can remain in the peace and faith that we have been and will be guided by the Lord. What I didn't understand then was the real reason for Tim's constant concern and need for reassurance. He was behaving with impure intent. He used me to comfort him and regularly reaffirmed the righteousness of our roles and behavior. Doing so kept me lodged in a belief that God condoned anything we need to do to gain the trust of human traffickers and other dangerous or evil people, while simultaneously keeping ourselves safe physically and spiritually. While I see how all that could be true at times and spiritually justified, I don't believe it is in Tim's case. During the past couple of years, I've witnessed firsthand Tim's degeneration into moral decay, mental illness, and harm to himself and countless others. Over the course of our many operations, Tim touched me repeatedly, trying to create a sexual connection by the words he spoke and the ways he touched. He was constantly filling me out and trying to turn me on as well. Tim frequently asked about my sex life, what most arouses me, whether I masturbate, what I'm willing to do with my boyfriend, etc. Tim also admitted to some jealousy about guys I dated and feeling rejected when I didn't respond to his touch as expected. Most of these touches were unnecessary other than to create chemistry because we weren't with traffickers or in settings trying to fool anyone. It was often while we were traveling alone or staying in a private jet. Tim spoke often about the disconnects in his relationship with Catherine, and I became a crutch for him to confide in and offer advice. It was often in regard to his sex life and wanting her to think more openly and be more exploratory. She was apparently not willing to wax or have oral sex, and I'm really good, he said. Tim frequently asked with bewilderment, "Why are you still single?" "On the first mission," he said, "if anything happened to Catherine, I'd marry you." He really pressed to know if I would feel the same. I told him we're not going to have this conversation. On another occasion, almost a year later, he said, "If I was single, I would marry you." One of the donors with us on a separate trip mentioned that he had said this about the Ukrainian operator as well. And clearly, Tim said it too, and it's redacted, it must be another victim, then denied it and made horrible accusations about her wanting to marry him. There was no care of training of operators during the missions, not before and not after. I would arrive home, useless for my kids and family and work, until I could process what had just happened. When I broke my foot on a training in Budapest and was not able to go on the operation for a while, I lost that revenue stream as well as the ability to run my home and business. Being unable to walk was financially devastating. There were many times of team disorganization and neglect, including when another female operator and I were left at a large home in Mexico all night, unprotected and forgotten by anyone else on the team. She left the next day, but still no one came for me. Fortunately, Tim and a couple of others stopped back at the house to grab something forgotten, and they were completely surprised I was still there. On the operations, I was an afterthought, like I wasn't really supposed to be there. I felt like I was risking and sacrificing for something that was becoming clearly about creating a story and not about putting together strategies to rescue. Eventually, Tim began to say our responsibility was to be storytellers, and man, could he spin up a story. No one seemed to need or care about the intel we gathered. My experiences and perspectives didn't have a landing place. No one would know who I had spoken with in the places we visited or what I had seen and heard. I didn't know if any of our efforts or the supposedly valuable information we gained had led to anything worthwhile. Tim spent very little time explaining the missions, the targets or victims, and an excess amount of time discussing sexual things. I never really knew what we had actually accomplished other than achieving chemistry and being convincing to usually no one in particular. Tim also became increasingly sexually perverse and aggressive. At least twice I was afraid when he was on top of me and dry humping me on the bed. We were alone in the hotel room the first time he did this, after which he went into the bathroom and masturbated. On another occasion, I was scared and unable to tell him as he had become aggressive, grinding determinedly, trying to come. When I tried to move away, he pulled me back under him. As we were preparing for an operation and staying in Miami, Tim wanted to practice and reconnect since it had been a while. One evening, he became demeaning and insistent that I meet him in the hot tub. I met him there late at night, alone, when I would rather have gone to bed but knew he would be upset if I refused. Tim began telling me all about the tantric massage that he and another operator experienced in California. He said she had learned a lot and was excited about what she could do with it in her marriage. Tim had learned some techniques in tantric that he wanted to show me. He said, "I'm going to do something. I promise I won't touch you. Trust me." He moved his hand up between my legs and pressed his finger just behind my vagina, tapping firmly 6 times, which he explains awakens the sexual chakra or something to that effect. He frequently talked about doing a tantric massage with him and other more intense practices than we had done previously to level up our game, insisting that undercover work was a perishable skill. He began drinking regularly on operations, justifying oral sex, nudity, and bed sharing with each other, creating situations precarious enough that he would vehemently argue these actions were necessary to accomplish the mission and retrieve information that would make all the difference in saving countless lives. Tim kept saying we needed a more intense training than we had done before and said Cooper had made all the plans so that Tim and I would both be surprised. He had scheduled a trip to Florida for this special training, Cooper did, y'all, where we would be meeting a Ukrainian operator, first routed through New York for a surprise appointment for just the 2 of us. Tim had been trying to arrange for a sexual massage for quite some time and was infuriated when our flight was canceled and could not be rebooked, even on another airline, to get us there in time for the appointment. Mike arranged for a midnight flight direct to Florida instead, thankfully skipping JFK, so Tim and Cooper spent hours scouring Salt Lake City for a place we could get a sexual massage that day. When the first place failed, Tim yelled at Cooper over the phone to find something. Cooper drove us from place to place, but they were all full. Tim was relentless, offering women at the desk up to $500 to get us into the room. He finally found a sketchy massage parlor where he was demanding enough that the therapist allowed us to squish together onto a single massage bed so she could rub us both at the same time. Tim was persistent about asking her if she could do a Nuru massage or bring in someone who could, and he tried to get her involved in any sexual talk he could elicit. She did offer him a hand job if he wanted. He asked her if she ever got sexy with clients and teased her about taking off her shirt. Tim kept acting like this was all part of a training designed by Cooper, and they were handing me a mini mission to accomplish. This time, on the bed, Tim gave me the assignment to get the massage therapist to strip down for us. I refused as he was joking. He was not. That seemed criminal to ask an innocent bystander to our training. When we finally left, before Tim was ready to, but because we now had limited time before our flight, I called him out about asking me to corrupt her. He shot back, "She's anything but innocent. She was willing to give me a hand job." He spoke disparagingly about me when Cooper picked us up, telling him I had gone soft. For the remainder of the training trip, Tim didn't have much of anything to say to me, including having me participate in any further trainings, which was supposedly the whole point of the trip. I didn't participate in anything essential or unique and spent those Florida days primarily alone. Tim specifically left behind at the house rather than taking me to visit Tony Robbins as promised. It was clearly my punishment for pushing back on and questioning his instructions. I told Cooper about the incident with the massage therapist, and he was definitely very concerned, but there was no repercussions for Tim. I now see many contradictions between how Tim protected himself with little concern for me and others, while creating in me a determination to risk everything to protect him and us as a partnership and OUR as a whole. It's ironic that he claimed it took him a while to detox from Brian Black mode. Brian Black is Tim's alias, which was often his excuse for foul mouth or inappropriate behavior. But he wasn't concerned that other operators might need to as well before returning home and getting back to real life. I wasn't offered any help, therapy, or almost any contact between operations. Tim has become a hero by proclaiming how he puts himself in real danger, but he was discrediting other operators, including myself, who took on the same risks. For example, consider the statement put up by the Spear Fund. Tim enlisted top stylists and Hollywood-level help to get disguised, but was not concerned about other operators being exposed, even if it meant we couldn't return back to the country in the future with family or friends. When my identity was directly compromised with cartel, Tim dismissed it as a non-issue, saying it would be dangerous if it was him, but not me. Tim believed his family needed help and protection while he was away, but others didn't, despite that I'm the only one my kids can rely on to provide, and that we're side by side going into the dark and risky places. I'm not stating this for sympathy or accolades, but to express the pattern of Tim's inability or unwillingness to acknowledge and or attend to the needs of others, including those of his partners and team. I felt extremely unprotected in every way. Tim would remind me to turn in my expenses and get paid after those operations, saying, "That's a lot of money," as though I would be compensated well. After all, Tim was highly compensated, but that was not the case. I was initially offered, and she doesn't say how much money a day, a super low operator rate compared with my other services, which made it a financial strain to go out for days and weeks at a time. There was many hidden costs of both leaving and being involved, which were not well compensated, especially taking into consideration the time required to prepare before an operation and recoup after. The all-day night schedule away from family and other life essentials, activities, opportunities, let alone the physical, emotional, and financial risk of this particular endeavor, which isn't offset onto a contract basis like it might be with a long-term or salaried and benefited employee. I finally settled for X dollars, and she doesn't say what it is, less than my professional day rate, which doesn't demand all-night work, time away, and personal risk, let alone require me to randomly be available for an unpredictable travel schedule and follow-up missions. Tim greatly facilitated my mindset that compelled me to consider doing what I did. He told me that after we met last year, he remembered me and would have known me if he had seen me in the mall or in a crowd. He meets hundreds of thousands of people, but he would have known me. With me, he said, there was something different. We connected in a way that was so rare for him. Even through high school, he never felt connected to anyone and started to wonder what was wrong with him. Catherine was one of the only women he had ever really connected with. It was such an anomaly that he could feel connected to her, so he knew he was supposed to marry her. Likewise, he felt so connected to me, as if we had known each other forever and before. Like we had had a relationship in a past life. Perhaps we were married or something, which he questioned Janet Ruse on about, and I wasn't surprised because he had shared with me how she had revealed many things about this principle of recycled lives, or that we were soul brother and sister. Y'all, that is the hussy and the chin all the way. Think about that, y'all. I love the cause and the mission of OUR enough that I was willing to excuse a lot with Tim's justifications and convincing. But after my experience in the DR, I could not run fast enough through the airport to get home. I was physically and emotionally ill. When Tim asked me to speak to and encourage potential operators, I told him I wouldn't feel comfortable with that until there was some reform. Sadly, it would never happen with him at the root of the organizational problems. I understood the tactics and risk associated with the couple's ruse as far as it was written and required. The spoken and understood agreement kept me safe until it didn't. Tim began pushing all boundaries and asserting that behavior outside of the initial rules were to be employed as needed. Tim found sufficient reasoning and was very convincing that frequent sexual boundary breaches were essential. I was led to believe that Tim had been doing this for years, as had the other male operators. I thought it was standard operating procedure as an essential way to protect everyone involved. What I have discovered in the past few months has been very revealing to me about Tim's real tactics and motives. Until I was able to talk with other women about their experiences with Tim, I did not know the lies he had been telling them about me. What I didn't know until now was that Tim was telling other women and some of his staff the same things about me to convince them that he was in need of a new operator who behaved well. I was now counted among those with whom he couldn't work with anymore. He told them I'd fallen for him, tried to kiss him, and seduced him in bed. I will not accept being lied about and disparaged when I have risked so much and given so much without asking for anything in return. And I'm not okay with staying silent when someone else is being lied about and publicly disparaged. I recently received advice to beware people who are talking about others. They're talking about you too. I'm absolutely dumbfounded that Tim would defame me that way. While I was doing everything I could to protect his image, he was smearing mine. I have a solid reputation among those who know me personally. Tim knows who I really am and was still capable of and willing to burn me by painting me as untrustworthy and slandering my character for his own self-indulgent purposes. This outright dishonesty and betrayal proves that Tim insidiously pitted us against each other to prevent us from talking. His manipulative scheme to secure our reliance on him alone. As it turns out, his efforts did not discredit our collective character, but exposed his own. As truth and deception battle, darkness will never overpower light. And so that concludes this alleged victim of the federal lawsuit that has been filed against Tim Ballard. Next time, on our next recording, we'll get to the next alleged victim. The central question is this: does Tim Ballard have to, at some point, if his ass is nailed to the wall in a federal judiciary court system, will he accept responsibility for all he's done? Or will he continue to deny and deceive and hurt so many? I guess that's just up for debate now, isn't it? Leave your comments, and I thank all those that are interested in this series. Let me be clear about something as I close. When it comes to personal responsibility, all of us in the whole world have failed time and time again. And I believe that God does instill in all humanity a sense of mercy. And that includes the judicial system as well. That mercy can be obtained. But that does not alleviate the consequences of criminal activity. A person has to pay the price. They can be forgiven. God will forgive everything except for blasphemy of the Holy Spirit. The bottom line is yes, God does forgive all. Humanity does have mercy. But that does not alleviate. You don't get to walk away from the consequences of your actions. And Tim Ballard's fixing to learn it the hard way. Make no mistake, OKJ's going to see this federal lawsuit through. And we're going to see some charges. We're going to see them. I don't know that the state of Utah is going to ever criminally charge him. But the federal court system, if you're talking about victimization of women, trafficking them, money being paid that can be proven for prostitutes. That you can't sit there and say, oh, we paid these prostitutes, or we paid these women that will give us hand jobs in these nasty massage parlors. That stuff's illegal to do. So we can go into these illegal things be around it, Tim Ballard partaking in it, and say it's all for what the illegality that's going on. They're saying they're trying to help victims of that. It is evil, it's diabolical, and Tim Ballard should be ashamed of himself, but he's not. He's going to hold on to the bitter end. It's a money shakedown, according to Tim Ballard. Well, he better start shelling out the bucks because his ass is going down. The state of Utah did not dismiss the other 4 civil cases. They dismissed 2. As far as the state attorney's office there filing criminal charges on Tim Ballard, they need to get their head out their ass and do the right thing for their citizens. And on a federal level, the federal judiciary, they don't give a rat's ass about any church ties or nothing like that. These judges are appointed for life, and Tim Ballard's ass is going to be nailed to the wall. You just wait and see. So let's get back together next time with the next alleged victim. And leave your comments. I love you all. And by the way, over the weekend, we'll get caught up on other Ray news, different cases and all that. I just want to get with y'all about this because responsibility is very lacking when it comes to murder, criminality, or any of this. Nobody wants to take responsibility when they do those things. And hopefully Tim Ballard will be put in his place once and for all. So with that being said, keep on looking.